Welcome to episode 69 of the Gambots podcast. I'm your host, Eric, and this is my co-host.
It's Christian.
On this week's episode, Christian and I both watched the Netflix original Coffee and Kareem. There was an epilogue to Tiger King, so we both watched that episode, and we'll talk about that for a little bit. I finally finished my first playthrough of Divinity Original Sin 2, so I will be giving my thoughts on that, and then finally we'll be ending with the Amazon review game. But first, Christian, you and I both watched Coffee and Kareem. This is the newest movie by director Michael Dowis, who actually directed Stuber, so I was pretty excited once I saw that. And it's starring Ed Helms and Terrence Little. This does not seem like it's too popular, just by all the reviews I've been seeing. Did you like this one?
Not a lot. I didn't hate it. It was just... wasn't one of my favorites.
So I've not really heard of this one before it was released. I saw a couple reviews and I was intrigued by it. I've been watching a lot of Ed Helms lately because I've been rewatching The Office. And I actually thought this one was relatively funny. Like it's a pretty middling of the road comedy. It actually reminds me more of like a late to mid 2000s comedy. It's a lot more crass than I think we usually see. And it definitely earns its MA rating.
Yeah.
So the basic premise of this is Ed Helms plays a pretty inept cop and in Detroit, and he starts dating this woman who is black, and he's a white cop, and so her son hates him, and the entire movie gets started by the kid basically trying to hire a thug to beat him up. And the backstory on, or I guess the other story that coalesced into this is Ed Helms was part of a drug bust that saw like the drug mastermind escape. And so it turns out that the kid goes to the guy who escaped to beat Ed Helms up. And it's them trying to get away from this guy because they're trying to kill them for seeing his group murder another cop. And then it turns into a buddy cop movie, but one of the cops is actually a 12-year-old kid.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely moments in this that I enjoyed. I liked a lot of the... I liked a lot of the relationships with the criminals. I liked the gangsters and how their whole dynamic was with each other. And I liked Ed Helms dealing with them. I just didn't like the kid.
Yeah. So I actually think the funniest part of the movie was Orlando Johnson and his two friends. Like, just the way that they're going about this stuff, trying to commit crimes. I thought they were hilarious. And I thought... just they were good, especially towards the end when they were dealing with a grenade and they didn't think it was real. I mean, I was dying at that part, but yeah, I agree. I actually think Terrence Little as the kid is maybe the worst part of this movie.
Yeah, so I have a thing with kids that don't respect authority. I think maybe it's just from years of working at the movie theater and dealing with like snotty kids that don't respect authority. But like whenever they put stuff like this in a comedy movie, I never think it's funny. I find it aggravating.
You dealt with one too many 12-year-olds, huh?
Yeah.
So I kind of want to like go through this story on this because there's a couple parts I did not understand how they made leaps. So Ed Helms is with this kid and they see the murder. At some point, someone claims Ed Helms kidnapped this kid, which does not make any sense. And it seems like everything could have been sorted out by him going to the police station.
Yeah, I guess it was that it was the person, the dirty cop was like feeding the media incriminating information on Ed Helms was the only thing that I could really come up with there.
Yeah, but they get they get the email clearly showing he didn't kill the cop back like halfway through the movie, and they're like, well, we only want to meet with the person we trust on the force. But they really could have just sent that to the media, you know?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
immediately would have been way safer than just meeting in a strip club with cops.
Yeah.
With like one cop.
Or send it to the whole force. Like, send it,
right.
Like, Ed Helms has to have everybody's email. Just send it to everybody. The whole precinct can't be dirty.
I mean, he could be on a reply all chain, and then people will just be angry that just unsubscribe, and then it just gets into a whole angry tirade by everyone.
It goes into the spam folder.
Yeah. Uh, I agree with you. Like, I think the kid was kind of annoying, but there were some. I think there were a few funny parts with him, specifically when he was trying to get Ed Helms to talk hard.
Yeah, so when he advises him to like act gayer, and then when they're interrogating Orlando, and Ed Helms just goes super romantic, and he's like screaming, "Orlando, will you marry me?" in the guy's face, and he's like, "I have to think about it. I have to think." Like, I was cracking up during that scene.
Yeah, the fact that like Ed Helms' character got Orlando to like contemplate like getting married to him was so good.
I also thought for the first like 20 or 30 minutes that the guy's name was Orlando Jones, and I was like, wait, the actor from The Replacements?
Um, Another part of this I actually thought was pretty funny. Was when they were infiltrating the like Orlando Jones's hideout before they captured him, and they were basically Assassin's Creeding stealth taking out everyone, but with a or with a fire extinguisher by hitting them in the head.
And then the kid just abandoned him.
Yeah, it had to use the bathroom. One part, like, you didn't really like the kid, and I didn't think he was the best, but he didn't bother me as much. I did not particularly care for the female cop in this, who was like the main antagonist, because
Betty Gilpin.
Yeah, I did not find her humor that funny, or I guess just how she portrayed that character. I don't know. I didn't care for her.
I mean, I really didn't on the whole either. I did think she was funny towards the end when she was trying to do that drug deal, and she just kept like ramping up the percentage, and she's like, "This has been a terrible day. I just want to go home."
Yeah, that was not bad. But like when you were first introduced to her, I thought she's so annoying.
Oh yeah, I agree.
I know you didn't particularly care for Terrence Little's character, but did you think he did a pretty good job actually acting his part?
Oh yeah, I think the actor did a good job. I just hated the character. Like I do try to distinguish those two things, because I did think the kid was good, and I would like to see him in better roles.
Yeah, I was actually pretty impressed with how he portrayed that role too. I am really curious about 12-year-olds nowadays. Well, number one, he said he was 12, but he was in 5th grade, and they threatened to hold him back. That kid had to have been held back once already, right?
Yeah, I would think.
I think I was like 12 in 6th grade, and I was like relatively old. So I feel like he was held back. But and also, do kids really use that many emojis? Because they had like the him using emojis to text stuff. I don't know, man. I cannot stand emojis. So that's like one of the things where I'm like, this is missing the mark, but maybe people do actually text that much.
I mean, I go through similar things anytime we deal with kids at work too, because I think to myself, like, we weren't that annoying when we were like preteens and early teenagers, right? And then I have to be like, yeah, we probably were.
Yeah. We didn't have those fancy emojis. We had to use a equal sign and a parentheses.
We had punctuation.
Yeah. I actually liked Terrence Little's mother in this. I thought she was hilarious towards the end, especially when she fought 2 of the gang members.
Oh yeah, I like Taraji P. Henson in almost everything I've seen her in, and she was a big selling point on this movie for me. And yeah, she was one of the best characters, I think.
She was the most competent of any of them. I think Ed Helms actually did not really do anything this entire movie.
Except get injured.
Well, right. So he got injured. They had like the whole "we're getting strapped up to go to war" thing, and then he accidentally killed someone because they shot him and he dropped a grenade. He did not, like, the whole shootout happened irrespective of their characters. Like, the 2 drug groups got into a fight. In Ed Helms, I don't think he even beat like his main enemy at the end. Didn't he get help from someone?
Oh yeah, Taraji shoots her like 35 times.
Yeah, so like, yeah, that's right. Like, so he literally does nothing this whole movie.
Yeah, I mean, they go into that battle and he gets shot in the arm. He gets his foot broken. He gets run over by a car. He gets shot again. It's a mess.
Yeah, I will say Orlando Johnson's character, I thought he was funny, especially towards the end there when he takes a turn. But when he's first introduced, when the police are raiding his house and he just comes out of his bathroom and they go to like the news footage and he's just pantless, I was dying when when that scene came on.
Yeah, that was pretty good. He was in the bathroom with his big headphones on, singing in the shower.
Right.
Walks out and there's 3 guns in his face.
And then like when he escapes and Ed Holmes is just like it's bad news bears, like it's a Benny Hill skit of them just running around the car till he gets away.
Yeah, so like this was a funny movie. It definitely had parts I enjoyed. It was it was lacking in parts that I would have liked more, I think.
Right? Like not every joke hit, but I will say to a credit to this movie, it is advertised as an hour and a half runtime. There's 10 minutes of credits. This movie is an hour and 20 minutes. It is a real quick watch.
It is, yeah, it is pretty tight.
And also, I was excited to see the guy who did Stuber get another cop movie. Like, I feel like this is his forte. You know, he knows how to do cop movies. Like, not traditional cop movies. Like, oh, we have to put two opposites attract to work together kind of movies. So happy to see him. Rotten Tomatoes, the critic score is 22% and the audience score is 33%. I'm not actually surprised by the critic score. I thought the audience would be closer to a 50, though.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is definitely not a critically acclaimed movie.
No, and it seems to be pretty unpopular. We don't really know the budget on it. I couldn't find anything, and because Netflix doesn't have box office, I don't know what we're looking at on that realm. But I'm with you. I would probably put this around a 50%. Like it's an okay movie. Like it's solidly like a kind of crappy comedy movie.
Yeah, I don't think it's on my recommend list, but it definitely doesn't deserve a 22 and a 33.
I would say you should watch this if you're bored and you're like, look, I've watched Happy Gilmore a lot. I don't want to rewatch it. Like I want a comedy. Well, Happy Gilmore is a classic, but like a bad Adam Sandler movie. Like I want to watch one of those.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely a class below Stuber, though.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think I put Stuber as one of my favorite movies last year. Definitely a step below. And honestly, this probably could have been better if I'm with you. If Terrence Little's character was less annoying.
Yeah.
On April 12th, Netflix released the newest episode for Tiger King, where it's an epilogue, so we kind of catch up with the characters. I shouldn't say characters; these are real people. The people involved with the docuseries Tiger King. Christian, did you get a chance to watch this?
I did. It was. We were waiting for it. We had like a game night over Zoom a few days ago, and somebody reminded me that it was dropping at 3 a.m., and so we waited up and we watched it that night.
Oh, so you watched it right when it dropped. I was a little disappointed because it wasn't exactly what I thought it would be, but seeing as how there's a pandemic going on, it makes sense what it is. It's basically Joel McHale interviewing 6 people involved in this. That's Eric Cowie. He was the zookeeper with the longer hair who worked at at a burger place eventually. Jeff Lowe and his wife. John Finley, the toothless guy who was one of Joe's husbands, is on it. Rick Kirkham, the TV producer. Saf, who was the guy who lost his arm, and then the campaign manager whose name I cannot remember his name.
Yeah, me either, actually.
I'm looking at an article right now and it does not have him.
Yeah, so I do have to say, I've been watching Community for like 2 weeks now, and it was really nice to turn this on and see Joel McHale.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I really like Joel McHale. I loved Community. I really like the Joel McHale show with Joel McHale when they actually are having episodes on Netflix, and I like The Soup. I don't know if he was the right interviewer for this, so like some of his jokes didn't land for me, and I don't know. There's some things I guess I wish he had probed more on that just, I don't know. I was a little bit disappointed.
Yeah. I was disappointed not to see Carol.
Yeah, I'm actually not surprised
Uh, I'm
she didn't agree to do this
I'm not
though.
surprised at all. But I'm still disappointed.
Yeah, I mean these are all these except Jeff Lowe are side people,
Hmm.
like they weren't directly involved in anything. I will say not a ton of information was really revealed at this part either. I picked a few names that were striking to me, and I figured you did the same, so we can kind of go over it. But I think the thing that was most surprising to me was of the six people, every one of them said Joe Exotic deserved to be in
Oh
jail.
yeah, this episode was not kind to him.
No, it actually, I think, brings him into a worse light. And when we talked about this before, I actually was uploading that episode to YouTube, so I was listening to it to make sure everything got uploaded right. And we made a point where it was like it seemed like the Netflix creators gave Joe Exotic a pass a little bit because he was so charismatic. And I think this starts to shed light on Joe actually wasn't a good person. He just came off well in that documentary. Like it's a persona.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. Just like how every single person that they interviewed like was very quick to turn on him, and it even seemed that way at the end of the main show because they even came out and said, every single one of these people came in and testified against him, which was not a resounding endorsement.
Yeah, that's what had always bugged me when I would see posts online where it's like, we got to free Joe, like he was cheated or whatever. It's one of those things where it's like, you know, it took a jury of his peers less than 2 hours to convict him on a lot of charges. Like, they had overwhelming evidence against him. Like, no defense attorney wanted to go up against the evidence they had against him.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. I did though like that during the Jeff Lowe interview, they addressed both the bathtub interview and the
Oh,
famous
yeah.
jet ski scene.
Yeah, I'm glad they brought that up. They also brought up that he dresses, he's really into
Yeah.
motocross, like with leather jackets and stuff. After this, I'm honestly would be more inclined to give Jeff Lowe the benefit of the doubt because he's like, look, the documentary needed a villain, so they cast me as that. And seeing as how I think the documentary did kind of gloss over some of Joe Exotic's flaws and also possibly sensationalize Carol Baskin to a certain extent, I would be willing to believe like maybe he is not as bad as they portrayed him as.
Yeah, and I mean it even seemed like that in the main documentary because I remember saying like they brought him in like he was going to be this big bad antagonist, and it seemed like he was a little bit of like a con man, but all he really did was bail them out and then move the zoo. Like he didn't really do anything super crazy besides wheeling those tiger cubs around in suitcases. But even when they interviewed that
Right.
first guy, he's like, "Oh yeah, uh working for Jeff is much more laid back than working for Joe ever was."
Right. And so I feel like he might have gotten a bad rap on it. Also, I think the documentary glossed over a little bit of this, where he had been charged with like euthanizing tigers unauthorized euthanation of tigers or whatever because he just shot them. Uh, the documentary tried to make it seem like, oh, they were older or whatever, but I mean, 3 to 4 of the people in these interviews were like, no, Joe killed healthy tigers because he needed space. Like that's one thing where people don't rally to him when you hear that. Uh, what's his name? Eric Cowie was specifically like, one of the things that haunt me is like they would use me because the tigers trusted me. They would come up to me, and then Joe would, shoot them, and the last thing they see is
Yeah.
me. And so when you have your own employees being like, yeah, like I should have did something, Joe was doing bad stuff, like I don't have as much love for Joe Exotic.
No, yeah, some of those interviews were pretty rough. And I mean, they went after Doc Antle for basically doing the same thing, and that's why his compound and stuff was raided. And it seemed strange that they wouldn't have mentioned that Joe was doing something very similar for basically in the entire length of that main documentary.
Right. I mean, and also they like Rick Kirkman had like told a horrible story about Joe where like a woman who he knew came up and was crying and was saying, Joe, I can't take care of my horse anymore, can you? And he goes, sure, we have tons of land, we'll put him here. And as soon as the woman leaves, he shoots the horse in the head and feeds it to the tigers. Like,
Yeah,
that's
that's
messed up.
pretty
Like,
brutal.
if you don't want to take care of the person's animal, tell them like don't do that.
Pretty brutal.
Yeah. So, was there anything else that like you were surprised finding out in this?
Not really. Like you said, there's not a whole lot of new information. It's just seems to dive a little deeper into things that we already kind of had hunches on.
There was one thing I have a note here. I forgot that we brought up in the episode that I was at least a little unclear on. It sounds like, according to the campaign manager, that Travis is when Travis shot himself. He said he was strongly believed that it was an accident because he saw it in his eyes before he passed. So I originally asked, I was like, "Oh, was this a suicide or an accident?" It was a little bit unclear. It sounds like it actually was an accident, not a suicide. And also, honestly, like no one in this had anything nice to say about Joe Exotic except Saf, he was the only one who was like, Joe's done a lot of bad, but he did at least a couple good things. Everyone else was just had nothing nice to say
Yeah,
about Joe
I mean, it
Exotic.
just goes back to what we had kind of said before, and they're every main character in this show was a villain in one way or another. Like there was really no heroes. Even the main documentary, as much as it glossed over some of the worst things that Joe Exotic did, at no point was it like, oh yeah, he's a good guy.
Right. I will say I do want to point out some possible areas where I think the documentary came up short after we talked about it 2 weeks ago, and I've been reading a lot of Reddit posts, so take this with a grain of salt. But I think they might have also done Carol Baskin a little dirty on this as well, because they sort of glossed over her husband, and it sounds like her husband was, from things that have since come out that I've read about, a bit of a womanizer, and they entirely glossed over how he had all of his money. They just said he had a lot of real estate. It turns out he was basically a loan shark, and he would buy people's houses at foreclosure, charge them an exorbitant rate to buy it back from him, or he would just evict them, which I guess is a viable business practice, but it's also shady. And then also, a lot of people were saying the documentary sort of alluded to it, but a lot of people involved in the Big Cat game are also involved in the drug trade. And so like Carol's like, oh yeah, he used to do low altitude flights and stuff. That's so you avoid radar because you're a drug runner. So like, I think there's enough to be like, well, wait a minute, like, was this guy actually involved in some other stuff, and there were actual, other things that could come into play, and like Carol Baskin is not the only thing that makes sense.
Fair enough.
So again, take that with a grain of salt. That was from Reddit posts and then posting articles and whatever. But it's one of those things where, at the very least, you always have to watch documentaries with a bit of kind of knowing that there's going to be bias somewhere. And I think it's worth it to look into some of the more egregious stuff. Maybe not egregious, but things that are more sensationalized. And finally, the last thing actually I think was really surprising, and this was definitely not addressed at all, was Rick Kirkman. He said that Joe Exotic was actually terrified of the big cats, and anytime you saw him with one was after they were heavily sedated, or if they had some sort of infirmity, like they were blind.
Oh yeah, that was a surprise.
Right, and it's weird that he's the only one who said it. Like, none of the other workers said that, so I'd be curious if that could be corroborated, but if that is the case, that's crazy.
Yeah, he built this whole persona around it, and it's just not, I mean, so much of it wasn't true, but I mean, that would mean like literally all of it. Every single thing was made up.
Right. But if you are scared of the big cats, like, why even have them?
Yeah, why go into this business?
Right. So I would really like to see. This is like the Fire Festival to me a little bit, right? Like it's such an insane story. But with the Fire Festival, like, we got competing documentaries from slightly different points of view.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see a Tiger King documentary from a different point of view.
Yeah.
And see how they line up.
So Eric, for a while now, you have been playing and talking about this game, Divinity Original Sin 2, and it sounds like you've finally finished at least your first playthrough. So what are your initial thoughts on this guy?
I gotta say, Christian, this is a really, really good game for people who like RPGs. This might be one of like the best Western RPGs I've played. But if you don't like RPGs, I think you will hate this game. Like it's not a game for it is not like a starter RPG.
Yeah, it's not something you can just casually kind of pick up.
No, there are so many systems in this game. I put around 68 hours on my first playthrough, and that's not including the couple times I had to restart because, party wipes or whatever like that. Like or even just the load times because the load times in this game are insane to start up. But yeah, it is very fun if you like this style of game.
So what is the main premise here of this game?
So the main idea of Divinity 2 is you exist in a world where there are sorcerers who can cast like this really powerful magic, but when they cast this magic, it in some way like it rips fabric or it attracts creatures from another dimension. So anytime there are these sorcerers in towns or whatever, they tend to attract monsters, and they cause a lot of destruction. So the kingdom starts basically capturing every sorcerer and sending them to an island to be like prisoners, so that they protect the population. And you start the game on a boat to this island you had been captured. And then once you get to the island, your goal is to escape. And then once you escape, you're part of a larger cosmic fight against these interdimensional monsters with traditional like elven and dwarven and human gods and stuff like that. And so you progress trying to essentially become like a new god to save the world.
Interesting. I do like the idea that just using this magic is enough to like draw monsters out. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense why people would hate sorcerers in this world because, they view them as the cause of a lot of suffering. And it's weird because it's like, the game has so many dialogue options and everything. So you get actually like diverse opinions on this where some people are like, no, we can use the magic to fight these monsters. And other people are like, no, they're the cause. Like we should get rid of it. And that actually comes down to like one of your five final endings is like how you go about dealing with magic in the world, and like brings up sort of moral quandaries, and they deal with it really well because you get like very in detailed epilogues for whatever path you decide to take. And it was pretty fun to actually replay the last part of the game. Like I had to do it 3 times.
Oh wow. So there are multiple endings you can trigger here?
Yes, I think there are a total of like 6 or 7. 3 of them are standard ones. 2 of them are if you have a very specific character. One of them's if you're a specific like race of character, and then one of them's if you like enter into a pact with a demon. You can get a bunch of different endings, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. So you had mentioned when we talked about this before that you were just coming into the last like chapter of the game and you were kind of dreading it. Was it as time consuming and draining as you were afraid it was going to be?
Yeah, honestly, this game borderline has too much content. It has not only does it have a lot of quests that can be completed in various ways, like so many characters in this have multi like branching dialogue options, which is really cool. But by Act 4, I was, 55, 60 hours in. I was tired of it by then. I just wanted to complete the game. But unfortunately, if you're like a level or 2 behind the enemies in this game, it's so much harder. So you have to do these quests to level up. So I really think this game would have hit the sweet spot for me if it was 3 acts instead of 4.
Yeah, that leveling that's such a pain. Like it's nice when you can have a game where it's like the enemies are just a little bit ahead of you if you do just story stuff, and so maybe 1 or 2 side quests every chapter is all you really need to stay ahead. But making you do everything to keep up, it kind of defeats the purpose of having those optional side quests.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I did not 100% everything on this game. Like I didn't do every quest. I did probably 85 to 90% of the quests, and I didn't 100% for lack of trying. Just some of this stuff is kind of obtuse, and you need to like look like you need to talk to everyone to get it, and I just got tired of talking to people
Yeah.
at times. So I missed one here or there, but I can't imagine like how you would. And I know people do it, and there's builds you can do to do it, but I was level 20 at the final battle, and the enemies were level 20. Maybe I could have handled it at level 19. I don't think I could have done it at level 18, just because those, like, even 2 levels make such a significant impact on like your hit points and all this stuff. Like it is legitimately a bit challenging.
Yeah. So you're talking about builds. Is this, and I know you had mentioned D&D, is this similar to like a D&D where you like create a character kind of from scratch? There isn't like a predefined like model that you work off of?
Well, yeah, yes to both actually. It is very much like D&D in that you can craft your own character, and it is very cool how in depth you can get. You can choose like a type and then change your skills around to fit that. You can put the stats where you want. You can choose to either be a human, an elf, a dwarf, or an undead or a lizard man, or an undead version of all 4 of those, which is cool. So yeah, it's very customizable if you like want to live out your D&D fantasy. Like in D&D, I tend to play as a dwarf ranger, so I played as dwarf ranger in this, and I picked the skills that I thought would suit my playthrough. Which, not knowing anything going into this game, I did not pick the best build for myself at first, but after the first act, you can respec, and so it wasn't a lost cause, but definitely it is close to D&D too, because you basically the soft level cap is, I think the hard level cap's like 21, but the soft level cap's level 20. It's you can get to level 21 if you do
Mm.
everything, but you can't really get past level 21. And so if you don't have an idea who you want to play, you can also just pick one of the characters that are on the box. They're basically your companions in this game that you can get to stay with you,
That's cool.
and they have their preset and their past and all that stuff. So if you don't want to create someone new, you can go that route as well.
That's nice that they do give you like a prefab build to choose from if you want.
Oh, definitely, especially if like you're new to RPGs or
Yeah.
something, and you're just you have no idea. It is a much easier jumping off point because you at least have a set like motivation. You know what your character's whole idea is, instead of like trying to craft that as you
Yeah.
go.
I saw a tweet years ago that said something along the lines of like growing up is like playing D&D, and once you learn the mechanics you realize that you built your character all completely wrong.
Oh, it's so true, man.
So if you can do these builds and load your stats into various things, I'm imagining that there's different like kinds of challenges. It's not just combat, right? Like you're going to have to like charm people or solve puzzles.
Yes, and that's actually what this game really reminds me of D&D with is you get a couple other stats, like you get persuasion's a big one, or thievery for pickpocketing or lockpicking or sneaking or whatever. So you honestly, there are, in the first 3 acts at least, there are a lot of ways that you can finish quests that don't actually involve combat, which is cool. I always think the coolest D&D scenarios are if you are clever enough to get around a challenge that your DM rewards you for that. And so I like that this game has that option. So if you're good at persuasion, you can kind of talk your way out of some stuff. And you can't do it on everything. There's obviously boss battles and whatnot in this game. But a lot of stuff you can kind of work your way around, which I thought was really cool.
That is neat that you have the option to just kind of like cruise your way through this instead of, you know, knocking heads everywhere.
Right. And they also don't really tell you which is the right way to do things, which is nice because it always leaves you a little bit guessing if you want to be surprised. Because when you enter into a persuasion scenario, they usually give you 3 options, and if you're like a finesse character or a strength character or whatever, like you can choose to go with that option, because if you have a higher like point total or whatever, you're more likely to be successful. But sometimes you have to actually read the things where it's like I would be if I was a high finesse character, but if I chose it, like the persuasion would only like it started at a higher tier, like I needed a 5 in persuasion to get it. Whereas if I had finesse, I would need a 4. But if I went strength, it's like base tier was 3 based on the actual context, because the character would agree with that. So it wasn't always a given that you would choose right even if it was your higher stat.
That's cool. So what are like the puzzles like in this if you have to try and like think your way out of things?
Christian, I think some of the puzzles weren't bad. They are not obvious. Like you can't just look at them and figure it out all the time. You usually have to read like tomes and stuff to help you figure it out, which is cool to a certain extent until you get to Act 4 and you're really tired of reading everything by that point. But that's fine. There in the first act, there's this place called the Gargoyle Maze where you have to basically make your way through a labyrinth, and each room, like there's a couple different rooms, and each room has a puzzle you have to figure out. So those are pretty cool. Like one of them involved battle, but you had to like someone was on fire, and you could only save that person by casting a certain spell like Blood Rain on him because it was like curse fire or whatever. So that was cool because you didn't really expect that, and you're trying to figure everything out. Towards Act 4, I felt like the puzzles got more annoying than fun. In Act 4, there was one where you're in a battle and enemies would keep respawning and you had to destroy a certain object while you were fighting them. And it's one of those things where you never ran into that before or after. So it's just kind of frustrating that they threw that mechanic in. Or there was one where there's a bunch of levers and you had to spell out a word and enemies would keep respawning even if you killed them unless you did a very specific thing, like it casts a very specific spell on them. But up until that point, you never really dealt with that before. And if you did not read like all the stuff beforehand, like you wouldn't know what you needed to spell out. And it was just very frustrating. So towards the end, I did not think the puzzles were as good, especially because throughout the game, there were various ways to complete things. Like the Gargoyle Maze, you could actually bypass it entirely if you went and explored a different part of the map and went through a dungeon. But towards the end of the game, like that was not an option. It was basically you had to do it how the game wanted you to.
That's strange that like halfway through they would change course on you.
Yeah, I think it's like they were like, we got to get it to the end at this point. It just that's why I think it lasted too long. Like had I ran into those puzzles 15, 20 hours earlier, I would not have minded them as much, I don't think. Yeah.
Puzzles are tough for me, even like when I'm crafting a game for D&D, because you want them to be like tricky enough that you make the players have to think, or like you were talking about having to like read the tomes and stuff, but you don't want them to be so much that, like you said, by Act 4 you're just tired of reading everything and trying to figure like, just let me finish this.
Right, and that's the problem too, is like not only do you have to read everything, and you kind of run into this D&D too, is it's like they throw stuff in there that doesn't matter. So it's like, well, I don't want to read this history book. Yeah. Like this has no effect on my actual game. Like, there's no indication what's actually important, which is a reflection of, they're trying to make it somewhat realistic, but also at the end of the day, it's a game.
Yeah, I played a game on PS3 called Star Ocean Till the End of Time, and there was a whole library you could honestly spend hours in just reading the different books that were on the shelves in there, and it gave you like a complete history of the world you were on, but it was utterly inconsequential. So like there was nothing in there that you absolutely had to find in order to get it. It was just like fun coloring for the game. And I like that you could dive in and really like explore some of the lore, but it wasn't a requirement.
Yeah, I played Star Ocean on the PS2. I think it was the third one in the series. I forget its title, but yeah, that game is dense.
It is, and it's long. Like I think I sunk 180 hours into that before I finished it.
Yeah, it's I don't remember which one in the series specifically, but that's supposed to be, I think, one of the hardest platinums on the PlayStation because it's like close to 1,000 hours or something insane because you have to like grind so much.
Oh yeah, it's probably this one because when it came out for PS2, there weren't any like achievements or trophies or anything because nothing was connected like that. But it had in-game trophies called battle trophies. Yes. And so to get the platinum now, since it's been re-released for PS4, you have to get all the battle trophies, and there's like 300 or 400 of them. And they're
Yeah, how weird was that game too, man? Because you start out on a spaceship and then you end up in like medieval
yep,
England and then you're in another
yep,
dimension.
it was very strange. But the
Yeah.
battle trophies are all crazy, like deal exactly 777 damage to an enemy in a single hit. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, the damage is randomized. There's no way to make that happen. You just have to hope for the best.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that I really like that game, but that would be a challenging one to. I would never platinum
Oh
that.
no, no way. Because then they're like the last ones are like defeat the last mega boss in ultra hard in 5 minutes without taking damage. And
Right.
so it's
Just
it's
crazy
functionally
requirements.
impossible.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, are you gonna have to do any of that with this? Like I know you said you haven't platinumed this yet. I think you had said you have to play through it again on ultra hard to get that.
Yes, unfortunately, this game I could have done it on one playthrough if I started out playing on the hard mode, but I didn't because I don't really play computer RPGs. This is my first one, so I went on like classic mode, which is just the standard mode, and so I am back to playing it. I'm hoping it does not take me 68 hours. I am hoping it takes me like 50, just because I know where to go right now, and I'm going way quicker on Act One right now. I'm already like halfway
Yeah.
through, and I've only played a couple hours. So that's that. It's interesting because the hard mode on this is It's the hardest mode. It's called Tactician mode, and then also if you have everyone in your party dies, your save automatically gets deleted,
That's just
which is unfortunate.
craziest thing.
Yeah, there is a way to help you. Like I have backed up my save onto the PlayStation Cloud because I could, if I got like 50 hours into this and lost my save, I would just give
Yeah.
up.
Oh,
So
100%.
I am like I'm at most I'll lose like an hour or two at this point because I usually play between 1 and 3 hours. So it's doable. It's really fun so far. I know how to make builds now, so I'm doing one where it's only two characters instead of the traditional four character party, but they have like an ability you can get that basically makes each of your character be double the level of the area you're in. So it's actually a little bit easier than four
Yeah.
people. So yeah, it's I just started right away because if I did not, I would forget like the mechanics of this game, and I don't know if I get it. So I just jumped right back into it the day after I finished.
Yeah, that was something that I had talked about with a friend of mine when I had finished Horizon the first time, and I knew to get the platinum I had to beat it again on ultra hard, and I was like, I think I need to take a break. And he kind of talked me out of it. He was like, just dive in, do it now, because if you take a break, you're gonna lose all the skill that you've built up in the muscle memory, and just knock it out now and be done with it.
Right, especially because like not only like the muscle memory, but just having an idea of where to
Yeah.
go and knowing what you can skip and stuff is helpful, especially on Horizon because there are so many side missions on that. Like you don't need to get to level 50 again if you don't want
Yeah, no,
to.
I can't even imagine having to deal with something like a total party wipe erasing my save file. It's like playing old Sonic the Hedgehog.
Right, and so yeah, I think I can do it. We'll see, but I am definitely backing up my save. I haven't wiped yet, but I imagine it'll happen just because there are some very random things that if I'm not paying attention to, like it can
Yeah.
happen. All right, guys, now it's time for our Amazon review game. Just a quick recap. I have a 5-star review for a movie from Amazon. I will read that. Christian will get 2 yes or no questions to help him narrow down what the movie is, and then he can either ask for another review or he can guess. He will get 2 more yes or no questions after the second review. Same thing with the third review, and then he will have to guess after his last 2 questions with the third review. We're keeping score this year, and if Christian gets on the first review, he gets 3 points, 2 points on the second review, 1 point on the third review. Christian, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. This movie comes about as close to accurate as it can, according to various interviews on the subject, while taking some liberties with some facts in order to create the narrative. Then again, people need to remember it's all about entertainment. It's not a biopic. Or is it biopic?
I've heard it both ways.
Okay. Cut that part. Okay. That being said, the movie is fun and entertaining, and yes, even inspirational. Those who feel they aren't into science fiction need to realize that ultimately, this movie and its original book are a true story about a human's desire to live, when it seems like it will be impossible for him to survive even a fraction of the film. The lead handles the heavy lifting of the title character, Mark Watney, with a deft comedic touch that makes one appreciate just how mentally prepared astronauts have to be in order to potentially handle this kind of crazy, horrifying stream of events and its consequences. Of course, certain circumstances have to play out perfectly, while other bad things seem inevitable in order to throw more obstacles into his path. But even non-sci-fi fans will find the storyline engrossing and will be cheering along for his survival.
No questions, The Martian.
Yes. Was it the main character?
Yeah, I just watched it not too long ago, and I remembered Mark Watney.
Nice. I was like, because there wasn't too much else in it. I was like, I feel like it needs some hint. So I also wasn't sure if you saw it or not. So if you hadn't, that was not a hint at all.
Oh man, I really like that movie.
I never saw it. I heard
it is
good.
Quite good. I just watched Deep Impact is on Netflix now. I had put it on my list like years ago when it was on Netflix, and then it disappeared, and then it must have come back this week because when I turned Netflix on the other day, it was right back number 1 on my list. And so,
they do that randomly. Like I had Lethal Weapon 4 or 3 or something on my list, and like it was gone, and then suddenly, boom, back.
But yeah, watching that reminded me of The Martian, and I have it on DVD, so I popped it in.
Nice.
I'm gonna keep watching Community. I'm about halfway through it now, so I don't know if I'm gonna stick with it the whole way to the end. It's starting to overstay its welcome, I think. I've heard that some of the main characters start to leave in the later seasons, so once that starts happening, I'll probably drop out of it too. I'm probably gonna finish Horizon's 3rd playthrough this week, so that's something to look forward to.
Yeah. I will say on Community, I don't know what season you're on, but basically after Troy leaves, it really starts to go downhill, especially like the last season they had on Yahoo or whatever was horrible, and I wasted my time watching it.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. I really enjoyed seasons 1 and 2. Like I said, I'm almost at the end of 3 now, and it's starting to wear. I only watched the first season the first time around, and watching it now, I keep thinking like, I understand why I stopped. I'm glad I'm still watching it now. There are some really funny episodes still, but it is kind of been downhill for the most part.
I definitely think it's worth sticking through until Troy leaves. I think it's either season 4 or 5. There's a great episode that spoofs like CSI. Or no, it's Law and Order. That's right.
I just watched one. I mean, they make fun of Glee a lot, but I just watched one where they basically just went all in on parodying Glee.
Yeah, there's some really good episodes.
Other than that, I'm planning on starting Spider-Man once I finish Horizon again. It's been sitting on my shelf for too long now, and we'll see how quickly I get through Community, but there's a bunch of movies in my queue that I think I'm going to start on instead of diving into another TV show.
Yeah, Spider-Man's awesome. I'm excited to see what you think of it. It is very fun.
I honestly kept forgetting I had it, and now this is the time.
Yeah. Anything else?
I don't think so.
For me, I'm going to be jumping right back into Divinity 2. I didn't want to give it another... Like, it literally took me the past month to beat that game, so I was like, I'm not waiting another month to give a review on it. So hopefully that's a little bit quicker. I am forcing myself not to spend excess money right now, but I really want to play the Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Yeah. I'm with you.
But I've not... I keep seeing reviews and it's like supposed to be good and the footage looks cool, and like I played that demo and a lot of my fears were, not as bad as I was worrying it would be, but it's just hard to justify paying for a $60 game right now, especially when I have such a backlog.
Yeah. And now when you pay that $60, is that just for like the 2 hours of gameplay that's out right now, or will they add Like, are you buying the whole game and you'll just get it as it comes out?
No, you get part one, but part one's supposed to be like people said to 100% it. It's basically a 40, 50, like 40 hour game, and if you're just going through, I've heard anywhere between like 30 and 40 hours to beat it. So it's a pretty substantial game,
Okay,
even
that's not
as
as
part
bad as
one.
I was thinking it was then.
Right, because in seven, I mean, Midgard is basically a 5 hour section.
Yeah, it is not much.
Yeah, from everything I've heard, they've done a really good job expanding it, which is what I was worried about, and they make you care a lot about a lot of side characters.
Good.
It's just they have some like fluff, like side missions and stuff.
Well, that's good at least. Yeah, when I had heard it was just Midgar for $60, that seemed too much.
Yeah, so I am really resisting the temptation. I did the same thing with Kingdom Hearts 3, I guess, but there is more like baggage associated with that because I hadn't played all the side stuff. Like the remake of 7 seems like it's like ground floor, right? Like it's not any side stuff. So we'll see. I feel like once I beat Divinity, we're going to see if how this pandemic's still going, and I'll decide then if I want to pay $60 for a game or not.
Man, you said Kingdom Hearts 3 and like I had to remind myself that it happened.
That was last year, man. Like last February or March.
It's just a little over a year ago, and I've almost like completely forgotten about it. You wait 13 for this game, and you can beat it in like 4 days, and then it's just done.
Well, it's one of those things where it's just like the anticipation, the anticipation for it was just greater than the game turned out to be.
Now I bought and downloaded that DLC that came out like 3 months ago. I should dive in on that at some point soon too.
I heard some mixed results about it where like they throw a lot of stuff at you, but the boss battles are supposed to be some of the best in the series.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I that's another thing. I keep forgetting I have it. I'm gonna have to take a stroll through my PlayStation hard drive and see what's actually there.
That's the problem, like, especially if you have PlayStation Plus and you start adding things every month. Like, I have so many random games that, like, I start, like, my problem is, like, I try and 100% these things, or at least I try and get the platinum. I don't do the DLC stuff. But I have Yakuza 0, which was awesome, but it's like 100+ hour platinum because you have to do a bunch of mini games, and so I started forcing myself to do the mini games to get them out of the way, even though I was loving the main story. But then, like, I got tired of the mini game, so I stopped playing, even though, like, the main story was awesome. So I keep running that.
I'm trying to almost 100% Horizon this time around too. I'm skipping some of the things I hated, but I'm trying to like ration the side quests so that I'm not just blowing through main story and then I get to the end and like, oh god, now I've got to do all these other things.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're going for the 100%, so you're doing like you said the ultra hard mode or whatever it's called, right?
Well, I'd finished that, so when I booted this one up, I'm just on like a normal difficulty because I didn't want it to be like a slog. I just wanted to enjoy the game again. But I'm skipping all like the hunting grounds because they were just irritating.
Tedious.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel that is the one problem with Horizon is I feel like half the side quests were cool. Like the ones where you had people show up at the end of the game, I liked those side quests. And then some of them, like I wasn't moved by them at all. Like they could just not have been there and I wouldn't have cared.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, guys, thanks for checking out our episode. If you want to contact us, we are at Gambots Network on Twitter, or we are gambots.blog@gmail.com if you'd like to email us. If you have a suggestion for the Amazon review game, please let us know through one of those ways, and we'll probably end up using it. Otherwise, we actually now have a website. We are gambotsnetwork.com. If you want to see some shorter 200-word written reviews on movies either we talked about here or actually more so movies we don't actually get around to talking about, we've been putting those up as well. Not just movies, I guess, video games, books, those kind of things. And if you are listening to somewhere you can rate, we would appreciate it, as that would help us get some more eyes on us. So otherwise, thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thank you.